This week, the CEO of Wells Fargo was grilled on Capitol Hill over a multi-year scheme that enriched the bank by illegally opening 2 million sham accounts without customers' permission. It seems to be an ongoing theme, big banks behaving badly. A few years back, it was Lehman Brothers, the world's fourth largest bank, until it got caught up in the mortgage crisis. Today, we hear the disturbing story of what happened to 3 women who worked for Lehman Brothers and were calling the crash 11 years ago. These are the allegations from their court case.
Greed is what happened. It's the almighty dollar. And once that comes into play, people lose all consciousness and sense of right.
What these women saw coming was the mortgage crisis that would plunge America into a deep recession in 2008. But their story starts 3 years earlier at B&C Mortgage in Sacramento, California. Starting in 2005, Linda Weeks noticed something fishy. She says loan officers from other companies began submitting loan applications to B&C with documents that were obviously doctored.
I found 5 in one day from the same company.
5 notices that you thought fraud had been committed?
That had falsified documentation in the loans in reference to income, bank statements, and job information. One of the 5 files, they used the same W-2, just changed the information on it.
They didn't know it then, but it was happening nationwide. Loan officers allegedly falsifying documents to qualify people for loans they probably couldn't afford.
Banks have conditioned us to trust them.
The story was told in The Big Short, a movie released last December.
The whole housing market is propped up on these bad loans. They will fail.
The housing market is rock solid.
It's a time bomb.
It was their duty as reviewers of the loan applications to sound the alarm, and they did so over and over again, they allege in a lawsuit, to their bosses and to B&C's parent company, Wall Street giant Lehman Brothers.
We would bring it to corporate office attention, and they started pushing us away, telling us to quit calling them and bothering them.
Too many people in the mortgage industry were getting rich off the questionable loans. The women say the more they resisted what they saw as fraud, the more insistent their superiors became.
So you guys were made into the bad guy when you were actually trying to help the company and the people and flag the fraud.
Yes, we were the troublemakers.
With matters coming to a head, the women allege in their complaint B&C brought in a mysterious account manager named Daniel, who began stealing their files at night, they say, and harassing them mercilessly by day.
He walked past my office regularly with his hands in his pocket, simulating masturbation. I thought it was all in my mind.
We didn't know what Daniel's role was in the office. He just walked around stimulating masturbation. So one day I remember he just came over to my desk and he just scooted up against me, started breathing down my neck and made sexual references to me, like he would like to be with a black woman. He's just a really, really creepy guy.
We were unable to reach Daniel, who's a named defendant in the case. Lehman Brothers wouldn't agree to an interview or address claims about Daniel. In the past, the company has said it hired an outside investigator to review the women's complaints about fraud, but found no evidence B&C employees were slipping falsified documents into loan files. In the lawsuit, Weeks says a manager brushed off her concerns about Daniel.
I reported him. He did racial slurs to me. I reported those. And I said, this is what Daniel did. And he says, oh, well, we call him Chester the molester. And he dismissed it all.
Did you come to the conclusion that Daniel was sent there to harass you and make you uncomfortable so that you would leave?
Daniel's in back of me with his hand on my shoulder, breathing down my neck, asking me, can he help me? And at the same time, he's pushing his genitals against my backside. Well, I lost it because I had a panic attack immediately. And I thought I screamed, but they tell me I didn't. They just saw me run out of the office.
By September of 2005, 6 women had resigned from B&C.
We refused to participate. We refused to turn a blind eye. And we have a conscience. I have a conscience. If I say that this is a good loan, I want it to be good for my company. More importantly, I want it to be good for the homeowner. And that's what got lost.
Before long, the ceiling began to collapse on the mortgage industry. Certainly not all foreclosures involved fraud, but here's one example of how homeowners got in way over their heads. In 2002, this California home sold for $301,000. In 2005, at the height of the bubble, it sold for more than double, and B&C financed the entire cost, according to public records. By 2006, it was in foreclosure. B&C had made so many bad loans, Lehman Brothers shut it down in 2007 and then filed for bankruptcy protection itself in 2008. Just like the women had feared and warned about, the chickens had come home to roost.
And it was happening, and now look what it's done. It was almost surreal. It was like, this is really happening.
They sued Lehman Brothers, claiming wrongful termination, but the bankruptcy stalled their day in court. And so the very women who worked so hard to make sure people could keep their homes lost their own.
You become labeled as a whistleblower, and mortgage companies don't want to hire you because you're a risk. I wasn't able to find work, and that affected my whole life. I lost everything.
I lost my apartment, I lost my car. I wasn't able to, send my son off to college.
Today, the country is recovering from the recession, and the women are hoping to reach a settlement with what's left of a liquidated Lehman Brothers. But life has taken a permanent turn.
It's devastated me. My self-esteem. I used to be a very competent, resourceful, and good underwriter, and I just don't have the confidence anymore. I can't remember how the strength of that person that I used to be is gone.
It's so devastating, and people don't really realize, but to know her before and to know her now and to hear her say that, it's kind of painful. It's very painful because it's so unfair. It makes no sense to us.
Lehman Brothers still negotiating debts, and bankruptcy court has said in the past that it denies the women's complaints and intended to fight them. So far, settlement talks in the case have been unsuccessful. Today, we begin with a question of human testing and the dilemma posed by the need to do research for the greater good and the right of human test subjects to know exactly what they're signing up for. Our incredible story begins in 2004 with a federal study of 1,300 extremely premature infants. Some parents say they had no idea they agreed to a risky experiment that could injure or kill their babies.
Little Drayshan Cook came into the world at 1 pound 11 ounces, fighting for his life. His mother, Charissa, was barely 6 months pregnant when he was born.
I remember the night that I went into labor, I was a hysterical wreck. I was afraid, I was scared, I was in shock.
How big was he? Do you remember?
Yeah, he would fit in your hand.
Shortly after his birth at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, Charissa agreed to enroll Drayshan in a study called Support. She says the hospital gave the impression she was simply signing up to get support in caring for a preemie.
Your thought was, when you signed the papers, that what was going to happen?
That my son would be getting the best care possible, and that even with his prematurity being as extreme as it was, that it would be okay because I had all of this help.
She had no clue, she says, that the Support study was actually a national experiment on the most fragile of test subjects, 1,300 extremely premature infants. Bernita Lewis also agreed to enroll her baby Christian in the Support study at the same hospital.
They wanted to use his medical records to help babies in the future. And I told them absolutely they could use any records they wanted to use.
Did she tell you there was a possible risk of death?
No, there were no risks discussed.
Support stands for Surfactant Positive Airway Pressure and Pulse Oximetry Randomized Trial. Funded with $20.8 million tax dollars, it was a collaboration among the National Institutes of Health and 24 research bodies, including Duke and Yale universities and medical schools. Researchers had good intentions. They already knew that without enough oxygen, preemies could get brain damaged or die. But too much oxygen, they could go blind. The Support study was searching for the sweet spot.
And the question is, what level of oxygen would be optimum in order to save as many babies as possible without having the survivors become blind?
To find out, the infants were randomly assigned, as with the flip of a coin, to either a low oxygen group or a high oxygen group. The study reached a tragic conclusion. The babies in the high oxygen group were more likely to go blind. Those unlucky enough to have been put in the low oxygen group were more likely to die. When the findings became known, similar research around the world was halted midstream. Bioethicist Dr. John Lantos defended the support study as an expert witness against families who unsuccessfully sued for damages, including Bernita and Charissa.
This was a study that was well designed, conducted to the highest ethical standards with a completely adequate consent that was conducted without harming any babies and led to an important finding that's going to save lots of lives.
On nearly every point, Dr. Michael Carome disagrees. He's an internationally recognized expert on research ethics at the watchdog group Public Citizen.
What's wrong with what they did in the study, in your view?
The parents of these babies weren't told the exact purpose of the research, the nature of the research in terms of how experimental it was, and the risks of the research.
After questions were raised, the government agency that polices study ethics sided with critics and issued a searing indictment of the government-led study. In a letter in 2013, the Office for Human Research Protections told researchers they violated federal regulations for informed consent for their failure to describe the reasonably foreseeable risks of blindness, neurological damage, and death. Dr. Carome was once a senior leader at the Office for Human Research Protections.
The ethics office was, in essence, saying these consent forms were unethical.
Absolutely.
The concept of informed consent arose from an American tragedy, the U.S. government's syphilis experiment on black men in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1932. For 40 years, the men were neither told they were in a study nor treated for their syphilis. An outcry in 1972 led to new rules. Researchers are now required to disclose risks to test subjects and get their voluntary informed consent. And studies like support must be approved by ethics experts where the research is conducted.
These were prestigious institutions and the federal government. How does something like this slip past everybody?
That is a great concern of ours. We looked at the consent forms from 22 institutions, and they all failed in their duty to protect human subjects in this study.
Most of the criticism is not coming from parents, but from regulators who, in my opinion, don't really understand the circumstances of oxygen therapy.
When the support parents learned about the true risks, the surviving study children were 6 years old.
What thoughts did you have?
It was really emotional. A lot of crying, a lot of disbelief, a lot of heartache, and then it was anger. I'm his mom. You know, I'm supposed to protect him, but it was almost like I threw him out to the wolves, you know?
I was angry, and I couldn't believe that some people who took oaths to protect people would actually do this. That was mind-boggling.
If you had been told the risks involved and what they were really going to do, would you have signed them up?
Absolutely not.
There's no doubt that some babies, because they were in this study, died as a result.
Amid the criticism, the support researchers and National Institutes of Health dug in. They launched a public campaign of opinion letters and meetings to attack the Office for Human Research Protections and pressured it to suspend enforcement action.
Those who've conducted this study and the federal government at large have basically said they don't think they did anything wrong.
I don't see how anyone could say nothing was wrong with playing Russian roulette with babies who had no say-so, no choice, no anything, just trying to survive.
Numerous support researchers, the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, and the University of Birmingham at Alabama declined our interview requests. After the study revealed more deaths among babies on low oxygen, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued new recommendations to keep preemies on the upper end of the oxygen curve. In other words, doctors should not do what the support researchers did to half the babies.